Hi, I'm Gareth, and this is going to be a screencast to help people get started with software-defined radio when it comes to the tools that we use for doing radio hacking. It's something that I don't see very often, so it obviously doesn't get covered very much. So I thought I'd do a quick little screencast, try and show you some of the tools and the software and the workflows that I use. If it's useful, great. A lot of the stuff can actually apply to Linux as well, because I'm doing it on a OSX MacBook laptop, and you're going to find that a lot of the stuff that we use is actually open source. So while some of the package manager stuff and the user interface stuff might be different, I use a Mac because it's as close to Linux, but with like working graphics and hardware suspend and stuff. I used Linux for many years as my primary operating system, so I don't want to get into a flame war, but I'm going to speak specifically to the sort of the OSX experience, and then hopefully it's useful to folks out there. So one of the first things you want to do is when you're using the terminal, you're going to, I'm just going to get rid of this for a second. You're going to get a terminal. It's going to have bash installed. You want to get rid of that immediately. While you can, of course, sit down on any computer and fire up a bash terminal and get work done, it's not efficient. There are so many better ways of living your life, especially if this is where you spend a lot of your time, as you will be, doing software-defined radio stuff. I'm just going to walk you through a quick process. We're going to use ZSH. We're going to install the ZSH plugins, or I'm going to at least point this stuff out to you, if not install it, and get a better terminal environment, which is iTerm2, and then some other stuff. So one of the first things you need to do if you don't have a different terminal already is to get iTerm2. iTerm2 can actually be installed through one of the two package managers. Now there's Homebrew and MacPorts. Now I used MacPorts for a bunch of years and then Homebrew for a bunch of years. Predominantly the Homebrew was because the JavaScript and Node packages were very good in that. And then I actually came back to MacPorts once I was doing a lot more software-defined radio, and that's where I've stayed, because at the time Homebrew, this is only less than 2 years ago, Homebrew wasn't, GNU Radio wouldn't build properly, and there was a lot of messing around. So anyway, I'm going to do this from MacPorts. I'm happy with MacPorts. I can do all of the things I want to do in whatever languages, and if you want to use Homebrew, that's great. Do that one as well. Not as well separately, but whatever. So again, this is just about the things I do. Maybe if it's useful, take what you want from it. The rest of it, just use whatever makes you happy. So to get MacPorts, we actually have to go to the macports.org and install MacPorts, and then download whichever operating system. When you click that, it'll download the package file, which I just tested a couple of seconds ago, and if you install that, you've got to have Xcode installed. That's easy to get, you'll figure it out. Once you've got MacPorts installed, then you can actually go over to terminal, ironically, and you can do sudo port install. Now obviously, you can do port search iTerm. And then you can see, there's a couple of things. Two ports that have got iTerm in it, but with iTerm2, so you can do sudo port info iTerm2 if you want, and it doesn't have to be case sensitive. And you can see more information about it. You can see the website that it's from, etc., which is kind of useful. And then you can do sudo port install iTerm2. Once you've got that, you've actually then going to have the application that you can launch on its own. So you don't actually need terminal anymore. So we can get rid of terminal. And then you can go, and I don't know if everyone uses this all the time, but you'll see that my menu bar is hiding over the side, and I never ever look at it because you do everything through splat space. So the command key plus space for spotlight search, or there's another program called Alfred. I honestly don't really use Alfred, other than it actually ends up being a really good calculator. And because when you hit enter, it actually copies it to the clipboard. So yeah, I don't know. Spotlight. There's probably people out there that love Alfred, but I don't use it. So Spotlight Search, iTerm 2, and you can see that it probably has a history of when it last launched. Now, what did I just do there? That's right. The app that I'm using to move windows around with shortcuts is called SizeUp. I think it's about $16 to buy, but there's a one called Spectacle app, which is Spectacle. I think it's actually Spectacle app. Yeah, there we go. .com. And that does it for free, so you can get that and learn the keyboard shortcuts or whatever. But it's super useful because you often get windows that don't open fully sized, and so Control Option Command is the default, and then you can go with your cursor keys left and right, up and down, or C for center, or M for maximize. So most of the time, the other one is Shift Control Option, and then you can go left, right, up, down into corners. So it's quite handy when you're moving windows around. A lot of the open source stuff that's built on like the GTK library will actually it will benefit from this because it's quite hard to sort of easily manipulate them. So anyway, you've installed your iTerm 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to expand that so you can probably read stuff a bit better. And now what we're looking at here is actually a custom pretty user interface, custom prompt with ZSH. Bash ZSH, go and look up the difference if you want to, but basically ZSH comes with a bunch of default stuff that's really, really good, and then ZSH, which is actually I think I've got it here somewhere already. Yeah, here we go. By Robbie Russell, is a plugin that gives you a whole bunch of extra features so that your terminal just becomes a lot smarter about things like dealing with plugins, with dealing with Git and Python and different services, things like your history. Like when you are on Bash, if you hit up arrow on your keyboard, you'll get the history of the things that you've just done last. But on ZSH, I don't know if it's ZSH or ZSH, but one of them, if you type the last command and then hit up arrow, it'll give you only the history for those commands, so that's super useful. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do with ZSH. The custom command themes, I think, because of course everything on Unix is all stored. Is it under custom? Here we go, under .files and .folders, and themes. There we go. So you'll see that there's a Solaya.zsh theme, which if you just create the custom themes folder under ZSH, any of the .zsh themes, any of the themes that you want to actually edit slightly. So for example, I made my own with the little lambda and the different colors. And it actually does cool things like it tells you when you're in a Git directory what branch you're on, and it also says when the last, when the branch was last updated, and you can do all of this kind of stuff with a custom terminal. And if you're living there, every day, it becomes a really handy thing. Now, normally you might also get used to, in your daily life of having shells open is opening multiple shells. This is also a terrible idea because you end up with a whole bunch of different shells all over the screen, and you're kind of having to select between them. So it's not terribly efficient, and one of the things is it doesn't work very well on servers. So when you need to log into a remote server, you end up having to make a whole bunch of SSH connections to get there. So instead of that, most folks would know, well, a lot of folks might know something called Screen, and that's a terminal multiplexer, basically a way for you to create a whole bunch of terminals and have some shortcuts so that you can open all these terminals in the one terminal window. But the better thing to use these days is Tmux, and again, let's see where we get it from. There we go, Tmux. Yeah, okay, so Tmux, you can see it here, Terminal Multiplexer version 2.2. iTerm 2 has support for Tmux, so you can do sudo port info Tmux, and it tells you all the info you want to know. If we just go full screen for a second, it tells you the website, tmux.github.io, etc., yada yada yada, but you then can just go sudo port install Tmux, and it will check. Obviously I already have it installed, and I think, yeah, tmux.conf. Here we go. So let's go dot tmux.conf less. Alright, so I'll show you why this is all nice and colorful in a second, but let's make it bigger. So we're in less at the moment, so we can have a look. Now I've added a whole bunch of stuff here that gives you different actually it's easier to drive in Vi. You can set the you'll see it down the bottom here, the tmux.conf. Okay, let me just be a bit more specific about this so that I'm not just waffling on. If you go to, for example, programming directory where I keep my stuff I'm working on, and then type Tmux, you'll get this nice pretty layout down the bottom because I've customized the way that Tmux shows its menu bar and which thing you're in. So if I want to create and so what are the benefits, Gareth? Stop waffling on. The benefits are that you can do shortcut commands and then create multiple windows, and not only that, you can actually drag the windows with your mouse on your screen, as well as having a whole bunch of move them around or move them around in a predefined kind of order. And that's super handy. Because you might have a whole bunch of things that you're working on, and you want to be able to work on them in the same directory and also run multiple commands. So hang on, just trying to think of something vaguely, remotely interesting that you might try and do. So anyway, you hopefully you get the point. Now, with this individual sort of window here, you can see that there are three different layouts. But if you Control A C, now the key command that sets up, so let's just go, actually let's go Vi, and the last thing we did was where is the bind key? I think it's at the top. Yeah, hang on. Prefix CA here. So here, line 30, unbind seat. So CB. So the control key was CB, which was kind of ridiculous because with here's something. Keyboard. With the keyboard modifier keys, caps lock key. Who the hell uses a caps lock key? I've seen people type with a caps lock key. That's not who you want to type like. Change your caps lock key to a control key, and now suddenly your Tmux interface becomes that caps lock A, which is actually now a control. So now you get control A whatever. And then also some of the things that get remapped, selecting windows, and hang on a second, there we go. Here, split window down the bottom on line 65 and 66. Remapping the split window to the pipe symbol and the hyphen so that you can actually go, so now caps lock A, which is the control, and then shift pipe, and you split the screen. It's just more logical. I read it in a blog post once and I've used it ever since. Okay, and then when you want to move from major sort of window to window, the numbers are they're numbered on the bottom, and you can see it starts at 0. So you can actually go, caps lock A. I'm going to say Control A from now on. You get the point. Control A 0 and Control A 1, and if Control A C creates a new window, and then you can change into whatever directory you want, etc., and do other things from there. So the great thing about this is that you can then, if you do this on a remote server, this all works under obviously Linux, Ubuntu, whatever. You can then detach, as in close, so I can just actually close iTerm 2 down now. You can detach from a server. If you're working on a laptop, you close your laptop, you wander away, you open it up somewhere else, and then you can actually SSH back to a server and reconnect. I'm only closing this to show you the example of Tmux. Oh, let's just make that a bit bigger so you can see. If you go Tmux attach, it'll look for any running things that are already, any Tmux sessions that are already running and reattach to them. So even if you close your window accidentally while you're typing, it's handy to run Tmux on your local machine. Now this is where I live all the time. I can't speak more, highly enough about this. This is a fantastic tool. Okay, what are the other? So let's get out of this. What are the other things that we want to look at? So let's just start from fresh for a second. And all right, yep. Okay, dot files. So you will find that folks will generally have their own sort of dot files repo. I'll show you this command in a second. Git browse. How'd you do that? And if you have your own dot files repository, you can actually then have the script. So the install script, which you can git clone your own dot files repository, and then you can run the install script and it'll put everything, your environment, back the way you want it. Now this needs a little bit of messing around between, you need to do a little bit of editing. Some dot files aren't specific to OSX or Linux, so they are specific to OSX or Linux, so generally I can still install this on Linux. So like git clone dot files, install, edit a couple of files, and now I've got my ZSH, OSZSH, my all the different dot files for the stuff that I do are all there, and I get my sort of home environment quickly set up on a Linux machine, which is quite important because there are a lot of live boot CDs, for example, whether they're Kali or Pentu, for example, that are relatively unusable if you just keep having to boot them from USB or whatever. So the quicker you can get yourself set up into a working environment that you feel comfortable in, the better, honestly. So dot files is there's a whole bunch of stuff online about setting up dot files. I think you can probably find that stuff. Tmux, Vim. I'm only going to say Vim because I use it all the time and I love it. But vimrc, yeah. So yeah, what can I say about Vim? I know. Vim Tutor, installed on pretty much every Unix machine that I've ever seen. I don't think you even need to install this one. You can literally learn Vim from the command line by reading this is just a text file that you edit. It opens a temporary copy and you edit it, and then you can actually just do what it says. You read the text and it says, now move down using J, okay, J, etc. And it teaches you how to drive Vim. There was some really good Vim tutorials online that are interactive. You can also do those. I like Vim because I've spent a lot of time doing Linuxy sysadmin stuff, and I'm always on computers that are all over the world, and it will just make your life so much easier if you get comfortable with a console terminal-based text editor. Some folks like Nano, some folks like Emacs, doesn't matter, whatever it is that you want. Find something, play with it, use it. I'm really fond of the fact that I learnt to drive Vim because now I can drive Vim and it's not a huge amount of effort. And the more you do, the more you'll find that there is to do, because you can do all sorts of really cool key combinations that will let you edit large sections of files and remove specific things and search through and only change certain parts, and it ends up being quite handy. So that's all I'll say about that. Mercurial HG, you don't see it as much anymore. I think everyone uses Git except for the folks who don't. So there's some things that you'll see that need HG. Just mentioning it because it's a silly thing. Oh, if you try and open a binary file, you'll end up where you've done it before, you remember, you'll end up where your terminal, your bash or ZSH, any of them will end up completely garbled text, and anything you type comes out as weird sort of characters. Even if you can't see what you're doing, you don't need to. And let's say, for example, you've got all of that history that's not preserved. If you were to log out of that shell right now, just type reset, and it resets all of the shell parameters, and it gives you a nice clean start again. So you don't need to log out and log back in again. I'm using notational velocity. Yeah, the point of that was just to actually get a process of taking notes. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, just some way of making sure that everything you do, you just copy and paste it into a text file, and you save that text file locally, and you've got access to it, because you'll always forget that it was you that did it. Oh, hub. Yeah, how do I do this? So it's actually, I've got a few aliases going on. Git is actually, so which Git? Git is actually alias to hub, and hub is a really, really useful command, because it lets you initialize a Git repository on your local machine, and then create it by you can just, when you type Git, it gets alias to hub. So technically you're doing hub create, and it will actually create a repository on GitHub if you've got your credentials set up, which you should have, and it's not too hard. Again, it's just go to GitHub, look at the documentation, and having your sort of SSH public key installed so that you can do things from the command line interactively with your GitHub account. Git create is great. One of the ones I use all the time is going into one of my big directories of somebody's code that I've downloaded. Git pull. Oh, it's up to date, great. Oh, hang on a second, the README, what was going on there, and then you can just go git browse, and it will take you to that page on GitHub. So that's actually fairly useful little shortcut. Okay, now a lot of this doesn't have a lot to do with software-defined radio yet, but I promise I'm getting there. Vim Vundle. Oh, shall I mention Vundle? Let's just do we'll do Vundle clean, Vundle update. These are all the plugins that I currently use with Vim that give me syntax highlighting, that give me all sorts of cool stuff. Now that you can at least see them, you can go through and have a look at those and see if any of them are actually valid to you. But there's for example, writing in C and Python, autocomplete is fantastic. Getting the menu drop down of all the different things it could be, and all the different functions available, and it's very very cool. So I've just updated all my plugins. So good. Size up. Textual. If you're on, I won't show this too much because it's people's conversations and it's uncool to do that. IRC. It's worth mentioning that IRC is still the place to go to find the humans who are super helpful and friendly and will assist you with doing software-defined radio and hacking stuff in general. RFCat, HackRF, GNU Radio, RTLSDR. All of these things, and it's on Freenode. Freenode, yeah, actually this is quite useful, isn't it? Freenode is older, like IRC is older than the internet, and Freenode is a wonderful sort of massive IRC network. It's the big open source one. There are others, but I'll just mention Freenode for now. The problem with connecting to an IRC server is, so like Slack and all of that stuff, they're all basically clones of IRC, but they've been done quite well and very pretty and have a lot of sort of API link-ins to everything else. The problem with Freenode when you're new is that you don't have a persistent connection. So I run what's called a ZNC, a bouncer, on a server, and my laptop connects back to that bouncer that's running on my server. And on that bouncer, its job is to keep all of the history that's happened in all of the channels that you stay connected to. So I'm online in IRC 24/7, so I don't miss any of the conversations. If you don't have that, then when you connect, if you disconnect, for example, laptops open, close, you miss big chunks of the conversation. One of the great things about IRC is that you can actually ask somebody a question. You start typing their name, hit tab, it auto completes. You ask your question, hit enter. They might be away doing something. A couple of hours later, they come back and they answer your question. So that's a really good. It can be real time, or it can be not so real time. But if you're not there and logged in, that can be problematic. I don't use IRC Cloud. I haven't. Again, it's a paid service. I've heard good things about it. I know that it definitely does what's sort of advertised on the box. And in terms of cost, it's not really that expensive as far as I can tell for an individual, like Teams and all that stuff. I think it's all more expensive, but what is it? Free. So you get free unlimited history, free iOS, 2 connections. So great. So you get your laptop and your iPhone, and stay connected for 2 hours while inactive. Okay, so here you go. If you want the good one, you go with the $50 a year. But I spend more than that just running even a DigitalOcean droplet, which pretty much that server, all it does is just keep my IRC connection alive. So don't get too caught up in the not buying services when they're worth it. If there are other services out there that do this for free and they're great and they're wonderful, then great. If you can run a ZNC IRC bouncer through other free places like I actually have done previously, that's also great. But I run my own. I do it. It costs a bit of money, but it's not a huge amount. Anyway, enough about the money stuff. What else is good? So the point is, get on IRC and go to those channels, and remember that there's an etiquette, and this is a community that's been running for a really long time. So learn what that etiquette is. Don't get in there and start just asking random questions that you haven't done any work on or any research. These are really smart, busy people who are volunteering their time for free, and they like having interesting, challenging questions that show that you've done the work to actually try and figure out what the problem or what the solution might be to whatever it is that you're trying to do. So if you go in there and be respectful of people's time and their efforts, then you'll get a really good experience. If you just treat it like it's some sort of paid support forum, you're going to be miserable. Because nobody needs to be answering your bullshit. NVIDIA GeForce. Oh yes, here we go. So did you know that there are NVIDIA drivers? If you've got one of the fancy MacBook Pros and it has its own dedicated chipset, if you want to be able to run some of the super pretty, I think seriously, literally one program, it's called GR's Phosphor. I'll show that in a minute, but you actually need to have NVIDIA drivers or you can't get the accelerated graphics enough to drive this thing that I'll show you in a minute. X11, you'll figure out that you need that, and actually it's just, what is it? It's X11. No, Xquartz, right? Yeah, sorry, I couldn't remember what the website is. Support, yada yada. If you go to the Apple support for X11, it'll link you to, there you go, xquartz.macports.org. Click it, download it, install it. You're going to need it to run GTK libraries, Python front end, pretty Python front end stuff or whatever. So you're going to need that. This is slightly tangential. RSS is still my sort of preferred way of getting all my news, because you're going to find that a lot of the folks who do publish technical works don't do it very often. They might work on something for 6 months and then they post one thing to their blog. That can be really handy to still follow RSS or subscribe to their newsletter if you want to do it that way. But RSS is still a really good way. Once you find some of these really obscure, interesting folks that are out there in the world, and the RSS feed will let you, you'll be like, oh look, that person's published something, and you see, oh, they published something last month and you didn't see it, but now you're so glad you did. I still think that's RSS should have won, but the commercial web has eaten its sandwich. So Mac to Imager. Imager, you must know Imager. Imager's a photo online image service. You linked it in the Reddits and whatever. There's a Mac to Imager application. It's got an I on it somewhere. Oh, there it is. And you can actually set that so that it automatically will upload to Imager using your account, and then you can link that into the IRC channels or whatever else. It's actually quite handy. Shortcuts, what is it? Shift Splat Shift Splat 4 on a Mac will let you, if you hit space, you can click an individual window and it'll take a screenshot of just that, or you can actually just click and drag and it'll take a screenshot of just that and dump it onto your desktop, but also then the Mac to Imager program will automatically upload it if you want, or you can cancel it or turn it off. That's really handy. I use that all the time because you're quite often doing something like with a GNU Radio or something, and you want to show folks and be like, why is this thing broken? Okay, so I've got an RTL SDR installed at the moment, just a Noelec thing, and you're going to find that there's a whole, port search RTL, wonder how many there are. RTL SDR, how many tools? I don't know, maybe I've got these separately. So RTL, EEPROM, etc. Okay, so I probably have installed a lot of these from source. Yeah, there we go. So that's running. There's a whole bunch. So I use a HackRF mostly. I've got one of these RTL SDRs. This is pretty much all you need to capture the signals. You almost never transmit with SDRs, not just because it's illegal, but because you don't need to. Most of the time you're not actually transmitting. If you're wanting to do, if you're wanting to use GNU Radio and transmit, then you will need something that can transmit in the frequencies that you're after, AirSpy, HackRF, whatever. But if you're capturing and trying to understand, what's going on with signals and then want to replay, then that's when you're looking at using something like those little $2, $1, CC101 chips, 1101 chips with an Arduino or something. So like for super cheapy stuff, can't go past an RTL SDR and an Arduino. And if you've got a bit more money, then you can get something like the Yardstick 1 or whatever. Like the hardware isn't that expensive, and there's a few things that will make life a lot easier, but yeah, the RTL SDR is a really good one to go with. Now, what else do I want to say about that? Not much. There's heaps of little cool toys there. Yes, okay, so probably not a bad time to just, I did a previous video and it showed some stuff, so I thought I'd just quickly show. In Spectrum's not on MacPorts, so I actually download the code. So Mike is the, hang on, let's just go, I think I've updated this 4 days ago. Okay, git browse, so you can see how I find things for code. In Spectrum is similar to Boardline. If you've seen Boardline before, if you don't know what any of this stuff is, then go and read up on it, etc. But basically, if you want to build it, here we go. The instructions are there. A lot of the GNU Radio SDR stuff uses CMake these days, and so it's actually quite simple to go through and install this stuff from source safely. So here's a bit of a principle. Install everything through MacPorts. Even your Python libraries, which we'll get to again in a second, because you can actually get most of the Python libraries that you need from searching for, I can't think of anything now. Oh no, here we go. Have a port installed grep Py27, because all of the MacPorts libraries, so these are all installed, great. Because there of course there's Python 3 and they've all got that prefix Py 3.5 or 3.4 or whatever. So if you're looking for a particular Python library, serial, that's great. So you could install Py27 serial, and now you've got that wonderful Python library. But if it wasn't available, you can then use pip. Of course, there's a Py27 pip is actually a package that you can install, and so then you can do your pip install whatever. But my advice, only do it if it's not available as a package. Now, in Spectrum's not available as a package, so not that it's a Python library, but it just made me think about that. So I've already got a build folder that I created, and if you look in there, there's all of these files that get created, because when you build, with CMake, you go CMake the directory back from within the build directory, and it'll go through and it'll check everything, and then you can make everything, and then you can sudo make install, and you can do that every time there's an update, because it's consistently will just rebuild, reinstall, and everything's fine. And then you can in Spectrum, and then you need a file. So obviously we don't have a file open at the moment, which I can go through, but you're also going to get the latest version of InSpectrum, and Mike's actively developing it, and Schneider's put a bunch of work in recently, I've seen. Yeah, some very cool stuff is going on. It's a wonderful, wonderful package, and so you can, but now, that's right, GQRX. There's a couple of ways of getting GQRX. I think I'm using the yeah, Python sometimes doesn't open in the foreground. Do we want to edit the settings? Yes. What do we got? Arta, Realtek, do things, click, whir, buzz. I don't know. Let's do the classic test. And FM and power on. Jesus, that's loud. Alright. Alright, that's super annoyingly loud. And then most folks will then click record down there in the bottom. And that's great. You can do that. You knock yourself out. I never use GQRX anymore because I've got Osmocom and Osmocom FFT. Now, of course, because I'm using ZSH, I can do the history for just that program. So for example, if we want to do, so -F is for phosphor, and then, sorry, capital F, and then -F for the frequency, and then the sample rate is relative to the how much bandwidth you're going to get. So there we go. So we're just going to take 2 megasamples per second, and centering around, hang on, what is the RTL? Do they even do that? Let's go to 800. Why are we not seeing anything? Somebody's going to laugh at me when they see this. I don't even... Oh, I don't know why that's... Why do we not have any radio frequencies? That's weird. I don't know. Okay, let's just pull that out and pull that back in. Maybe the antenna's stuffed. That could be possible. You should see this thing's a piece of garbage. It's traveled all over the world with me. I had it a very long time. It wouldn't surprise me if it was completely stuffed. Alright, so let's pretend that that's an RTL SDR in there. But really, I'm just going to plug in one of my old hack RF, and we're going to do the same thing. 2 megasamples per second, and there we go. We've got some frequencies and some things, and you can full screen that. And 80. What am I going to do? Let's just go somewhere. Okay, so how about 4339915? What do we got? Oh, there's something. Is that a signal? There's a signal there somewhere. 390. Anything being particularly loud at the moment? Just trying to find a quick signal so I can take a sample or something and open it, but doesn't look like there's much going on at the moment. No. 15. There we go. There's something going on. And click record. Look, there's not going to be anything if we do this, so I'm just going to do it anyway and click stop. Now, because we run it from the command line, you'll see that it outputs the position of the file to the command line, which we can just then copy and in Spectrum paste, and it'll open up our file. Now, within Spectrum and Mac, you kind of have to scroll a little bit before you can actually see the little scroll bar. That's just a Mac user interface thing. Yeah, there's no signals there like I thought. But anyway, I'll do a different session on how to drive these apps particularly. But I'm just going to say that this is the duck's guts for looking at signals. When you do get signals and then you add your derived plot, say for example your frequency plot, and then you drag that over the place where you've actually got a FM modulated signal, then you get all the pretty things, and then you can extract symbols, and with that you then get this again output to the command line. You get all those signals, and then you can use something like IPython. Now again, where do you think IPython is stored? Port search pi27 IPython. Yeah, there we go. And then you can assign that information you just got to a variable, and now you've got a variable that you can work with. And again, it's just really quick and easy and useful to be able to pull data out of radio signals that you find within Spectrum and to inspect stuff. So what else are we going to talk about? Moving along. Phosphor. So yeah, phosphor is, I might just quickly do that again. Let's quickly do that again. Osmocom, FFT, yada yada yada, but without the phosphor. And then you'll see that you just, so if you don't have an accelerated graphics, or it runs really poorly, you can just use this interface, which is absolutely fine and will give you all the information that you need, because you will see spikes. There we go. So you'll see the radio signals and spikes for this, but sometimes this gets a little bit laggy and I lose control of my mouse over the UI, so gonna have to kill that, aren't I? Alright, let's try and do this again and pick a 433. I can never remember, where are we? The US. Someone's going to be sitting there going, you don't know. And we should be able to see some sort of signals going on here. Anyway, same features, all the same stuff, but it's really hard to see those transient signals. Yeah, there we go. Without GR phosphor, and you'll see that even more so with signals like Iridium, which are like 9 milliseconds long, and you can just see the little pings go off in phosphor. So it's a really good tool. Anyway, that's enough about that. GQRX, GR modes. Okay, so all of the other GRs, that's probably worth mentioning, isn't it? List GR everything. Alright, oh no, that's a terrible idea. List all long grep GR. Alright, so there's a whole bunch of GNU Radio. Oh, okay, so Mac sudo port install GNU Radio will install a ton of stuff, and it'll take an hour or so to compile. Probably not exactly that long, but it's a huge amount. It reminds me of compiling the Linux kernel back in the day on Pentium 2s. It'll install everything you need, but then there are these things called outer tree modules, and those outer tree modules will give you a lot of the extra functionality, stuff that I've been playing with recently. GR Iridium is really good and worth having a look at, and then you use, you can use GNU Radio from the command line, but then you get your GNU Radio companion, and because you've got your X11 installed, you've got GNU Radio installed, you can get that a nice user interface, and there we go. And then all of the outer tree modules build in the same way that I was showing that sort of in Spectrum builds. And again, weird user interface, but if you hit / you get that search function, and then you can type Iridium, for example, and then you can see all of these modules that are available, all of these sort of methods and what do you call them, blocks. All the blocks are available to install. That's probably all that we need to say about that. But the way to, for example, GR Iridium, and you'll see you can change into the build directory, which you would have created the first time, and then you cmake ... etc., and then you make, and then you sudo make install, and I've found that to be fairly rock solid when it comes to, as long as you're installing everything you can through MacPorts or your package manager, whichever one, and then anything, because you will get conflicts. If you can install things, for example, in Python, you can install the Py27 library of something, and then you can do the pip install, and then you'll get conflicts. And that's an interesting thing. I have this wonderful little script, which I can't even remember where I found it. This little script here uses OTool just to look through all of the local libraries to find out if any of the libraries are actually linking to system Python rather than the version of Python that you're using by default. And I've used that a couple of times when everything's been completely stuffed, and you generally find it's that sort of Python library conflict, or whatever language you're using, predominantly Python at the moment for me, but you'll find that if something seems to be completely stuffed with Homebrew or MacPorts, then it's generally one of those conflicts where one of the things you're trying to, has installed and is trying to use is linked to the wrong library. It's not linking to its own library. It's linking to a system library or a previous version of the Python, or whichever one. What's another one? I don't know where the name came from. Jupyter. Yeah, Jupyter Notebook. I don't know. Somebody made up a name. Jupyter Notebook will let you do. Let's just do a new text file. Is that it? No. New workbench. Notebooks, Python 2. There we go. If you want to use a graphical user interface, you can actually print arg. How does that work? There you go. You can do it here, and the good thing about this is that you can then rerun stuff from a graphical user environment, which is quite handy for some people. I generally find that I'm quite happy using the command line, but this is quite a cool tool. If you have to do a whole bunch of code and you need to edit a bunch of times and keep rerunning it to find out what the output is, that can be handy. What else? I think I'm waffling on a little bit now, so I'm just going to try and think about what else is not covered. Actually, that's not too bad so far. So, what else? What else? Leave page. I'm going to stop there for now. Leave me a comment in the YouTubes if you made it this far, if it's even vaguely useful, because I'm going to start talking about other stuff in the next video. Maybe that'll be something you'll be interested in. Thanks for watching, if that's a thing that happened. Maybe it's just me.